You didn't think I'd miss this, did you? You didn't think I'd miss this, did you? I told you I would return.
This can't be real. It's a trick.
She owns everything now. The deal is done.
You really thought she would walk into that room and break. That was the plan. That was exactly what Malik Dlamini and his fiancée, Nandi Khumalo, had imagined when they sent the invitation. They wanted Zara Okoye to come to the Sapphire Midnight Gala looking small, awkward, and out of place. They wanted the whispers. They wanted the pity. They wanted the silent satisfaction of seeing the woman Malik once married standing in the same hotel where he had built his empire, now reduced to nothing more than an embarrassing memory. But what nobody in that ballroom understood was this. Zara had not come to reclaim Malik. She had not come for revenge, and she definitely had not come to beg for dignity from people who had never learned how to recognize it. She came because at exactly midnight, the hotel they were all celebrating inside would no longer belong to Malik Dlamini. It would belong to her. The ballroom of the Crown Meridian Hotel glittered like money made visible. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. Gold light spilled across polished marble floors. Waiters in white gloves moved like shadows between tables crowded with politicians, celebrities, mining executives, fashion investors, and the kind of old money families who smiled as if the world had been built for their comfort. At the center of it all stood Malik. Tall, sharply dressed, perfectly controlled. He laughed easily, shook hands carefully, and carried himself with the practiced confidence of a man who had spent years convincing the city that his rise had been inevitable. Beside him stood Nandi in a silver gown that caught the light every time she moved. Her smile was beautiful from a distance and dangerous up close. People kept telling them the same thing all night. Perfect couple, perfect event, perfect future. And maybe, from the outside, it looked true. But the most important detail of the evening had not yet entered the room. At 8:43 p.m., one of the event coordinators leaned toward Nandi and whispered, "She's here." Nandi's lips curved slowly. For a second, it was almost impossible to tell whether she was excited or cruel. Maybe she was both. "Good," she said softly. "Let her in." Malik's hand paused around his champagne glass, only slightly. But Nandi noticed. "You're still bothered," she murmured. "I'm not bothered." "Then why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" Malik did not answer. Across the ballroom, conversations moved around them in polished waves. Laughter rose and fell. Jazz played beneath the sound of expensive people discussing investments and private schools and offshore property. Then the ballroom doors opened. At first, almost nobody reacted. One late guest at a high society gala was nothing unusual. But then heads started turning, one by one. A conversation near the bar went quiet. A woman beside the staircase stopped mid-sentence. A politician near the front table lowered his fork. Then the silence began spreading through the room the way silence only spreads when something too powerful to ignore has entered without asking permission. Zara Okoye stepped inside like she had been born for that exact moment. She wore black. Not soft black, not decorative black. A deep, commanding black that made every other color around her look uncertain. The gown was elegant, sculpted, severe in the shoulders and fluid at the hem, with subtle gold beadwork that caught the chandelier light like embers hiding beneath ash. No oversized jewelry, no desperate sparkle, no need to prove anything. Her hair was styled simply. Her posture was perfect. Her expression was calm in the way only a woman can be calm when she has already survived everything meant to destroy her. She did not scan the room nervously. She did not hesitate. She walked forward slowly while the entire ballroom adjusted itself around her presence. And the strangest part was not that she looked beautiful. It was that she looked untouchable. Malik felt the change in his chest immediately. Not longing, not regret. Something colder, something closer to fear. Because the Zara he remembered had once learned how to make herself smaller in rooms like this. This Zara did the opposite without saying a word. Nandi recovered first. She stepped forward with a smile polished enough to pass for grace. "Zara," she said warmly, as if they were old friends instead of co-authors of one another's worst memories. "You came." Zara looked at her. Then she smiled lightly. "You invited me." Nandi gave a soft laugh. "Of course. I thought it would be nice." The lie floated between them, beautifully dressed and completely obvious. Zara's eyes moved past her to Malik. He had not expected that part to hit him so hard. Not the sight of her. The steadiness. The complete absence of visible hurt. Years earlier, when Zara still lived in his penthouse and carried his last name, and stood beside him at events where she was tolerated but never embraced, he had learned something ugly about power. Power becomes addictive when people around you reward your worst instincts. Malik had not started out cruel. At least, that is what he liked telling himself. When he met Zara, he was still ambitious, still hungry, still building. She was brilliant then, working in boutique property analysis and investment research, seeing value where other people only saw failure. She could study a block of dying commercial real estate and tell you what it could become 5 years before anybody else understood the opportunity. Back then, Malik loved that about her. He loved the intelligence. He loved the self-possession. He loved the way she could stand in a room full of men who underestimated her and make them feel small without ever raising her voice. But success changes weak men in very predictable ways. The higher Malik rose in Johannesburg's luxury hospitality world, the more he began surrounding himself with people who liked reminding him what would make him acceptable to old money. A softer wife. A quieter wife. A more convenient wife. Someone less African in the ways they thought mattered. Less bold. Less visible. Less threatening. Zara was none of those things. She was not loud, but she was impossible to erase. And the city noticed. So did Malik's mother. So did his investors. So did the women who smiled at Zara in public and mocked her once she turned away. At first, the humiliation came dressed as jokes. A comment about her accent when she spoke too passionately. A laugh about her village confidence whenever she challenged a business assumption. A remark about whether her style was too strong for certain events. Then, slowly, the jokes sharpened. People stopped asking her opinion. Malik stopped defending her. Eventually, he became one of them. He corrected her in front of guests, interrupted her at dinners, told her she did not understand how elite rooms functioned. The worst part was not even the cruelty itself. It was the performance. The way powerful people humiliate others with enough elegance to keep calling themselves decent afterward. The ballroom tonight still held many of those same faces. People who had watched Zara get diminished in real time and had decided that silence was the safest side to stand on. Now they stared at her with open confusion, because they had expected embarrassment, and what they got instead was presence. Nandi leaned in closer. "I'm glad you made the effort," she said. "I know events like this can be uncomfortable after everything." Zara's smile did not move. "You mean after the divorce?" Nandi's expression flickered for half a second. Malik stepped in then, voice smooth, controlled. "That's enough." Zara turned to him fully. For a moment, the ballroom seemed to disappear around them. He had imagined seeing her again many times, though he never admitted it, not even to himself. In some versions, she was bitter. In some, she was broken. In some, she looked at him like he still mattered. This version was the only one he had never prepared for. She looked at him like he belonged entirely to her past. Nothing more. "Zara," he said carefully, "you look, well." "Do I?" "You do." "Then that must be disappointing." A few people close enough to hear them pretended not to. Nandi laughed too loudly. "Oh, I think tonight should be light-hearted. No tension, no old wounds." Zara glanced around the room slowly. "Interesting place for that." Then she walked past them. Just like that. No argument. No trembling. No need to defend herself. And somehow, that was worse. Because Malik had spent years believing that if Zara ever stood in one of his rooms again, he would still control the temperature of the space around her. But he didn't. Not anymore. As Zara moved through the ballroom, people parted for her instinctively. A hotel chairman from Cape Town recognized her first, though he said nothing. A banker near the stage narrowed his eyes as if trying to place a face he had only ever seen in a private board document. A luxury developer from Nairobi whispered to his wife. Near the bar, two women who had once mocked Zara's marriage stared openly at the gown, the posture, the impossible calm. "Who styled her?" one whispered. The other answered without looking away. "That's not styling. That's power." At 9:25 p.m., Malik stepped away from guests and walked toward the private lounge corridor, supposedly to take a call. In reality, he needed air. Need was not a feeling he liked. He especially hated needing distance inside a building that carried his name on the front. The Crown Meridian had been his masterpiece. 32 floors of gold glass ambition in the richest district of the city. A hotel for people who believed price itself was proof of quality. A hotel that had turned Malik from a respected entrepreneur into a symbol. Investors trusted him because he built things the city could photograph. Politicians liked being seen with him because wealth became more glamorous when reflected in hotel lighting. For years, the Crown Meridian had done exactly what Malik needed it to do. It had made him look permanent. But permanence is one of the easiest illusions to manufacture, and one of the easiest to lose. 6 months earlier, the trouble had started quietly. Expansion loans, refinancing pressure, a delayed international partnership. 2 acquisition bets that had looked brilliant on stage and unstable in real life. Malik told almost nobody how exposed he really was. Certainly not Nandi. Certainly not the ballroom full of people praising his empire tonight. He kept telling himself he could close the gap before anyone saw the weakness. Then, one of the private lenders had sold a major portion of his distressed hotel debt. That was when the danger became real. Because debt, once sold, becomes anonymous. And anonymous buyers are much harder to charm. Still, Malik had one advantage. He believed he knew how the game worked. He believed money always had a recognizable face eventually. He just had not realized he was already standing in the same room as the person holding the final move. In another wing of the hotel, hidden behind velvet ropes and a guarded service corridor, Elias Mokoena checked the time on his watch. At exactly midnight, the final transfer documents would activate. Everything had been arranged with painful precision. Controlling debt positions, enforcement rights, emergency acquisition triggers tied to default breaches. Malik had spent months pretending would not matter. Elias had worked in private finance for 3 decades. He had seen empires built by arrogance and destroyed by timing. He respected timing more than ambition. And tonight, the timing belonged to Zara Okoye. He had met her 2 years earlier in a boardroom where 3 men had tried to explain distressed hospitality restructuring to her as if she were a clever child. 10 minutes later, she had dismantled their model, exposed the hidden liabilities in the portfolio, and sketched a better acquisition path on a legal pad while they watched in embarrassed silence. Elias had called her terrifying. Zara had smiled and said, "Only to people who mistake neglect for weakness." That was the first time he took her seriously. It was not the last. After the divorce, Zara had disappeared from public society, which was exactly what most people expected. What they did not know was that disappearance can be a strategy. While Malik expanded loudly, Zara built quietly. She began with one failing guest house on the outskirts of Durban, the kind of property nobody glamorous would touch because it needed too much work and offered too little prestige. She restructured it, profitable in 11 months. Then a coastal lodge no bank wanted. Then a debt-heavy boutique hotel in Accra. Then a staff-led turnaround partnership in Kigali. Then a hospitality operations fund backed by African diaspora investors who trusted her because she understood something many wealthy men never did. A hotel is not just marble and branding. It is systems, people, debt, energy, service, land, timing, reputation, weakness hidden behind presentation. By the time Malik finally heard the name Crown Meridian Capital, the firm was already acquiring assets across the continent with ruthless elegance. He did not know Zara founded it. Nobody in his world knew. She kept her image private, kept interviews rare, kept ownership layered. Let the work speak in rooms that only cared about numbers. And numbers, unlike society, are often less sentimental than people. At 10:10 p.m., the gala resumed its rhythm. Music, smiles, cameras, a charity auction for education initiatives, luxury gift boxes, public generosity with private motives. Nandi regained confidence once she noticed the room had not exploded the way she secretly hoped it might. Yes, people stared at Zara. Yes, they whispered. But there had been no collapse, no scandal, no public discomfort dramatic enough to satisfy her. So she decided to create one. She stepped onto the low stage during the auction intermission and lifted her glass. The room gradually turned toward her. "My dear friends," she began, glowing beneath the lights. "Before we continue, I want to acknowledge someone special tonight." Malik felt his stomach tighten. He knew that tone. Nandi smiled toward Zara. "An old part of our story is with us this evening, and I think growth should always be celebrated." The room became still. Nandi continued. "Zara, you once stood beside Malik while this hotel was only a dream. Life has taken all of us in different directions, of course. But how beautiful that we can all stand here now, mature, successful, grateful. A few people smiled. A few looked away. Everyone understood what this was. Humiliation disguised as elegance. Nandi extended a hand toward Zara. Would you join us for a moment? There are invitations designed to include, and there are invitations designed to expose. Zara knew the difference instantly. But she also knew something Nandi did not. Midnight was only 90 minutes away. So Zara set down her glass and walked toward the stage. The ballroom watched her like it was watching the opening scene of a scandal. Malik wanted to stop it. Not to protect Zara, at least not only that. He wanted to stop the feeling growing inside him that this entire night was moving according to rules he did not understand. Nandi stepped closer to Zara with false warmth. I just think it's inspiring, she said into the microphone. To see how gracefully people move on. Soft laughter scattered in a few ugly corners of the room. Nandi tilted her head. You must miss this world sometimes. Zara looked at her. This world? Nandi gestured at the chandeliers, the gowns, the room. All of this. Zara let the silence stretch just long enough to become uncomfortable. Then she answered, I don't miss rooms that confuse display with value. No laughter this time, only stillness. Nandi smiled tightly. Well, some rooms change lives. Yes, Zara said. They do. Malik stepped forward. That's enough. Zara turned to him slowly. For you, she said. Or for me. The words landed harder than anybody expected. Because everyone in that ballroom knew, suddenly, that they were no longer watching a woman brought there to be diminished. They were watching a woman permitting other people to embarrass themselves in public. Nandi tried one last time. And tell me, Zara, what do you do now? That question. That perfect society question. Not who are you, not how have you been. What do you do now? Because elite people often ask about work when what they really want is ranking. Zara looked directly into Nandi's eyes. I buy things people are too arrogant to protect. The room went quiet again. Nandi laughed, but the sound lacked conviction. How mysterious. Zara stepped back from the microphone. It doesn't need mystery, she said softly. Only timing. Then she walked off the stage. At 11:47 p.m., staff began preparing the midnight signature moment of the gala. A ceremonial toast. An announcement about the Crown Meridian's luxury expansion into Europe. A major financing partnership Malik planned to unveil to restore confidence in whispers that had started circling his business. He checked his phone 3 times in 2 minutes. No confirmation. No reply from one of the lead investors. A bad sign. He told himself not to overreact. Nandi was retouching her lipstick in the mirrored hall outside the ballroom when she finally said what had been bothering her all night. She's different. Malik kept his eyes forward. People change. No, not like that. He said nothing. Nandi lowered her lipstick. You didn't tell me she could still command a room. Something hard flashed across Malik's face. She used to command rooms before I met her. Nandi turned slowly. Then why did you spend years acting like she never mattered? Malik looked at her then, really looked at her. And for the first time that night, Nandi felt something crack beneath the polished surface of the evening. Because she saw it. Not love. Not exactly. Recognition. And regret so late it had curdled into anger. Before either of them could say more, the house lights shifted. Midnight approached. Guests returned to their places. Cameras were positioned near the stage. A string quartet softened into silence. Malik stepped up to the microphone. He was practiced enough to look composed, even while his pulse pounded in the base of his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said smoothly, "thank you for honoring us tonight." His voice carried through the ballroom with the ease of habit. He spoke about hospitality, vision, African excellence, legacy. Everything sounded correct. Everything sounded expensive. Everything sounded like a man still in charge. Then, halfway through the speech, the main ballroom doors opened again. Not dramatically, not loudly, but with enough purpose to interrupt the air. Several people turned. Then more. Elias Mokoena entered with 2 legal officers and a representative from Johannesburg Commercial Trust. That alone was enough to disturb the room. Bank people do not enter society speeches at midnight unless money has become a public problem. Malik's expression changed almost invisibly. Only those who knew him very well would have seen it. But Zara saw it. From the back of the ballroom, standing alone beneath a chandelier, she watched without moving. Elias stopped near the stage. "Mr. Dlamini," he said, voice respectful but firm. "Forgive the interruption. This cannot wait." A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. Malik stepped down from the microphone just enough to keep smiling. "This is not the place." "I'm afraid," Elias replied, "the timing is contractual." That word. Contractual. Somebody near the front inhaled sharply. Nandi whispered, "Malik." He ignored her. The legal officer handed over a sealed document. Malik opened it, read the first page, then the second. The color left his face so completely it looked almost theatrical. Except it wasn't. The ballroom understood something had gone wrong long before anyone knew what. Malik looked up. His voice came out low. "This is impossible." Elias answered evenly. The enforcement rights on the Crown Meridian Group debt were transferred and executed at 11:59 p.m. Control has changed. The room went dead still. No glasses clinking. No whispers. Nothing. Malik shook his head once. To whom? Elias did not answer immediately. Instead, he turned, and every eye in that ballroom turned with him, toward Zara. She began walking forward, slowly, not rushed, not triumphant, just certain. Her heels touched marble with calm precision as the city's most powerful people watched the truth rearrange itself in real time. Nandi went pale first, then Malik. Because by the time Zara reached the center of the room, there was no version of reality left in which anyone could misunderstand what was happening. Elias spoke clearly. "The controlling buyer is Noir Meridian Capital." He paused. "Founder and principal owner, Ms. Zara Okoye." Shock does not always arrive as noise. Sometimes it arrives as a room losing the ability to breathe. People stared. A journalist near the side door dropped her phone. A hotel investor whispered, "No." Someone near the front said, "She owns Noir Meridian?" Another voice followed, louder. "She bought the debt?" And then the truth hit the room all at once. Not the woman Malik discarded. Not the ex-wife invited as a joke. Not the memory they expected to pity. The woman who now owned the flagship hotel they were standing inside. Malik stepped off the stage completely. "You did this," he said. Zara stopped a few feet away. "Yes." Nandi laughed once, small and broken. "This is insane." "No," Zara said. "This is due diligence." Somewhere in the crowd, a man actually gasped. Malik's jaw tightened. "You planned this." Zara held his gaze. "You taught me the value of planning around unstable assets." The words were clean, precise, lethal. He took another step toward her. "This hotel is my life's work." Zara's expression did not change. "That's the problem. You thought it only had one life." Nandi looked between them, eyes wide with the horrible understanding of someone realizing she had spent all night insulting the owner of the building. "You came here knowing?" "I came here because you invited me." The room almost flinched at that, because suddenly the entire evening rearranged itself in memory. Every smile from Nandi, every stare, every carefully dressed insult. All of it had happened while Zara stood there already holding the final card. Malik lowered his voice. "What do you want?" And there it was. The question powerful men ask only when power stops obeying them. Not how, not why. What do you want? Zara looked around the ballroom slowly. At the chandeliers, at the investors, at the politicians, at the women who once watched her humiliation and said nothing. At the city's polished elite standing inside a building they thought reflected Malik's permanent importance. Then she looked back at him. "I wanted to see whether this room had changed." Malik stared. "And?" "It didn't." Silence. Heavy silence. The kind truth creates when it enters a room that cannot argue with it. Elias stepped in with one final document. "Mr. Dlamini, transition discussions can happen in private. Operational authority transfers immediately." Cameras began flashing then, wildly. Journalists smelled blood and history at the same time. Phones lifted across the ballroom. People who had ignored Zara for years suddenly wanted proximity. Nandi stepped backward, as if the floor itself had become unreliable. 20 minutes earlier, she had been one of the queens of the evening. Now she was just the woman standing beside a man who no longer owned the room. Malik looked at Zara again, searching for something. Mercy, bitterness, satisfaction. Any emotion he could recognize and therefore respond to. But Zara gave him none of those. Only composure, only completion. Only the calm of a person who no longer needs recognition from the people who once denied it. A journalist pushed forward first. "Ms. Okoye, did you target the Crown Meridian specifically?" Another voice shouted, "When did you acquire the debt?" A third, "Is Noir Meridian expanding into luxury control acquisitions?" The questions came fast. Zara answered none of them immediately. Instead, she stepped onto the stage Malik had been using 5 minutes earlier. The symbolism was almost too perfect. The room fell quiet again. No microphone feedback, no dramatic music. Just Zara Okoye standing beneath a chandelier in a black gown while the city waited to hear what a woman sounds like after surviving public dismissal and returning with ownership papers. She finally took the microphone. "When I used to enter rooms like this," she said, "people measured me by what they thought I had access to." Nobody moved. They looked at who I arrived with, what I was wearing, how much permission I seemed to have, and they decided my value before I ever spoke. Across the ballroom, Malik lowered his eyes. Zara continued. "That kind of room teaches a dangerous lesson. It teaches people to confuse invitation with importance." Somebody near the front table whispered, "God." Zara's voice remained calm. "But the truth is simpler than that. A room does not define you because it lets you enter. A room only reveals itself by the way it treats people it thinks cannot change its future." Now even the cameras seemed quieter, because what she was saying was no longer just about a hotel. It was about all of them, all of their rules, all of their rankings, all of their elegant cruelty. Zara looked once toward Malik and Nandi. Not long, just enough. "Tonight," she said, "I did not come here to be seen. I came here to close." The ballroom broke. Not physically, socially. The exact way power structures break when the wrong person wins in front of the right witnesses. People surged toward her. Bankers, developers, editors, investors who had once ignored her messages. Women who had once treated her like decorative discomfort and now wanted to tell her how inspiring she had always been. It would have been funny if it were not so predictable. But Zara had expected this too. Success does not change the morality of rooms like that. It only changes how fast they pretend they believed in you all along. Malik stood motionless for several long seconds while the evening dissolved around him. Then he crossed the floor one last time until he stood near the edge of the stage. "Zara." She looked down at him. The entire room watched. And in that moment, more than any other, Malik felt the full weight of what had happened. Not the business loss, not the public embarrassment, not even the cameras. The loss of narrative. For years he had been the author of the story people told about them. He was the successful man. She was the woman who could not survive without his world. He was the future. She was the footnote. And now, that story had died in public. "I was wrong," he said quietly. Zara studied him. Maybe it was the first honest sentence he had spoken in years. But honesty that arrives after power is gone often feels less like growth and more like panic. "You were comfortable," she replied. His face tightened. "That's not the same thing. For weak people, it usually is." He looked like she had slapped him. Maybe worse. Because words spoken softly in front of witnesses often cut deeper than rage. Nandi had already disappeared into the edge of the crowd. No one followed. No one comforted her. Rooms like that do not waste sympathy on the suddenly irrelevant. A reporter called out, "Ms. Okoye, one final question." Zara turned. "How long have you been planning this acquisition?" She thought about the ruined years, the divorce papers, the first guest house, the impossible loans, the nights studying hospitality debt until sunrise, the meetings where men smiled at her ignorance before realizing too late that ignorance belonged to them. The moment she first saw Malik's expansion model and recognized the fractures beneath the shine. Then she answered. "Long enough," she said, "to understand that arrogance is the cheapest asset to buy. People give it away for free." That line would be quoted across business pages, society blogs, finance newsletters, and social media by sunrise. But Zara herself left the stage before the applause could find a rhythm. She had not built all of this for applause. She had built it for leverage, for freedom, for the right to stand inside rooms that once tried to shrink her and decide with absolute clarity whether they were worth keeping at all. At 12:21 a.m., Zara stepped out of the Crown Meridian through a private side entrance. The winter air was cool. The city lights glowed against the glass exterior of the hotel, now reflecting her ownership instead of his mythology. A black car waited at the curb. Elias opened the rear door but did not speak immediately. Finally, he smiled. "Well," he said, "that was cleaner than I expected." Zara looked back once at the building. Inside, the ballroom would still be buzzing. Phones would still be exploding. People would still be rewriting their loyalties in real time. Malik would still be standing somewhere inside the shell of a public identity that no longer held. And yet, none of that was the most important part. The most important part was quieter. The woman who once stood in elite rooms asking herself whether humiliation would define the rest of her life was gone. Not healed by revenge, not repaired by attention. Transformed by work, by patience, by competence, by becoming too solid to be rearranged by other people's approval. Elias waited. "Are you satisfied?" Zara's answer came after a long breath. "I'm finished. Not with business, not with ambition, not with building, but with the need to be understood by people who had only ever respected visible power." She stepped into the car. As it pulled away from the curb, the Crown Meridian rose behind her, brilliant and gold, and no longer carrying the meaning it once held. Because buildings, like people, can survive new ownership. What cannot survive so easily is the illusion that cruelty makes anyone powerful. By morning, headlines across South Africa and beyond would carry variations of the same story. African investor acquires luxury hotel empire during gala. Mystery founder of Noir Meridian revealed. Ex-wife invited to event emerges as new owner. But the truest version of the story would never fit into a headline. It was this. They invited her there to remind her of the life they thought she had lost. Instead, she arrived carrying the deed to the room. And when midnight came, she did not need to humiliate anyone. She only needed to let the truth introduce itself. Because the most dangerous woman in any room is not the one asking to be chosen. It is the one who already owns the exit, the future, and the floor beneath everyone's feet. And that night, in the hotel Malik built to make the city kneel to his name, Zara Okoye did not raise her voice. She did something far more unforgettable. She changed the owner of the room while everyone was still inside it.